It's a chaotic time in the NHL right now as free agency began yesterday and there's been a ton of signings and trades. So in this video, I'm going to be going over 14 different NHL trades and grading each one respectively. So if you're interested in this type of content, make sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on any future videos. And with that being said, let's get into it. So the first deal here is Akira Schmid being traded from the Vegas Golden Knights to the Panthers in exchange for a 2028 third-round pick. The Panthers completely overhauled the goaltending position. They don't have Sergei Bobrovsky anymore. And Akira Schmid's a 26-year-old goaltender who had an .893 save percentage and a 2.59 goals against average with a 16-10-6 record for Vegas last season, as well as -1 goal saved above expected. Schmid was excellent for the Devils during the 2023 playoffs, but other than that, he really hasn't shown much at the NHL level. As a backup or a 1B, maybe he could do okay behind a really strong defense in Florida, but Vegas had a very strong defense too, so just a minor pickup for the Panthers here. Also, Schmid's an RFA, so we'll see what kind of deal he gets. And on the Vegas end, for better or worse, Carter Hart seems to be their guy. So trading their third stringer and trying to replenish their assets is pretty solid work here. So grading this deal, I think for the Panthers it's going to be a B-, and for Vegas it's going to be a B+. And shortly after that, the Panthers went out and traded for Jacob Markstrom from the Devils, along with Angus Korczak, and they sent back Evan Rodriguez, Jesper Boqvist, and Ben Steeves. Now on the Panthers end, you're getting a 36-year-old goalie in Jacob Markstrom who has 2 years left on a deal paying him $6 million per season. He's coming off a horrendous season in New Jersey where he had an .883 save percentage and nearly a -12 goals saved above expected. Now, Markstrom's always been an inconsistent goalie. He's usually great one year and then terrible the next, so maybe next year he'll be good behind a strong Florida defense, like I said with Schmid. But if you have the choice between a 36-year-old Jacob Markstrom with a 6x2 contract or a 38-year-old Sergei Bobrovsky at a 7x3 contract, which is what he got in Toronto, and then a cheap backup like Schmid or Tarasov, I think I would definitely go with the Bobrovsky route. And I know Bobrovsky had a terrible year in Florida, but I definitely trust him a lot more than I trust Jacob Markstrom. And on the Devils end, first of all, I love getting off of that Jacob Markstrom contract. Sure, they take back some salary, so they only clear up $1.4 million in cap space, but you get an incredibly effective middle six winger in Evan Rodriguez, 32 years old on the last year of a contract, paying him just over $3 million. And he's been a consistent 15-goal, 40-point player for the Panthers. Defensively responsible and is a great penalty killer as well. 30 points in 45 games in the playoffs when they won back-to-back cups. Big-time playoff performer. I think he's going to be a phenomenal addition to the Devils' middle six. And they also get Jesper Boqvist, who is a former Devil, and he's coming off a really tough year with 4 goals and 9 assists only. He has a ton of skill and speed, I think. At 27 years old, he's probably not due for a big breakout or anything, but he's shown the ability to get you 10 goals and 25 to 30 points in a season, so if he can do that for the Devils, I think that's just another great piece in this deal. And if both those guys pan out, then I think the Devils actually have a pretty solid top 9, and they really struggled to score last year, but hopefully these are two players that can give them a bit of punch in the bottom 6 offensively. For Florida, this is risky, and I don't think there's a ton of upside with it. So for their grade, I'm going to go with a C-. But for the Devils, I like both of the forwards they got, and they get off the Markstrom contract, so I'm going to go with an A. The next deal was a 1-for-1 defenseman swap between Vegas and Pittsburgh. The Pens get Caden Korczak and Vegas gets Parker Wootherspoon. The Pens also retain half of Wootherspoon's contract, so Wootherspoon only makes $500,000 against the cap for Vegas. He's a very effective shut-down middle pair defenseman who had a phenomenal offensive season as well, putting up 30 points for the Penguins. His career high previous to that was 8 points, so maybe the 30 is unrealistic and he's more of a 15 to 20 point guy, but this is phenomenal value for Vegas, clearing that cap space as well. Korczak wasn't a vital piece for them on their Stanley Cup run. He only got into 13 playoff games and he made over $3 million, so very solid work by Vegas in this deal. They are in desperate need of cap space. And for the Pens, you get a younger defenseman in Korczak who's 25 years old and has put up excellent defensive results for Vegas in a depth role. Not a ton of offense to his game, 16 points and 3 goals this season. But on the Pens blue line, I think they need more of that shutdown ability with the offensively minded defensemen like Karlsson, Letang, and Sam Girard. They have the 4th most cap space in the league right now, so they can afford to take on his contract, which isn't even really that bad. So I kind of like the youth movement angle from this in Pittsburgh. So for trade grades, I'm going to go with an A- for the Penguins. Maybe I'm a little bit too high on Korczak and it should be lower though. And for Vegas, this is an A. They clear the cap space and they get a very effective defenseman as well for only $500,000. The next deal we saw was the Nashville Predators acquiring Maverick Bourque and Ilya Lyubushkin from the Dallas Stars in exchange for a 2027 second-round pick and a 2028 third-round pick. Now, I actually want to start on the Dallas end here. It sucks you have to trade a player like Maverick Bourque, but they are in desperate need of cap space, and he's an RFA. And in this move, they also clear some money with the Ilya Lyubushkin contract. So you get $3.25 million in cap relief there, but they still only have just over $10 million in cap space, and they still have to sign Jason Robertson. So they didn't have much leverage in this scenario. I am a little bit confused why they traded Bourque to a divisional rival. But that being said, they do clear cap space in this move, so I understand the logic, and they get some assets back, a second and third round pick, which they can use to parlay into something else potentially. And for the Predators, I absolutely love the addition of Maverick Bourque, 24-year-old center who is an RFA, but 24-year-old center who had a very solid season, 20 goals and 41 points. His development has been phenomenal. He goes from dominating the junior level to dominating the AHL and now becoming a very effective second or third line center. And Nashville is in pretty desperate need of some offensive flair and someone who can do that not just in the short but also in the long term. So I think Maverick Bourque is an excellent addition to this team. Should be interesting to see what he could do next to a guy like Luke Evangelista. And Lyubushkin, he's a 32-year-old right-shot defenseman. In a third pair role, he can be an okay, purely defensive defenseman. And he's a cap dump, but he only has 1 year left on his contract, and Nashville doesn't really have to worry about the salary cap. So overall, I think this is a very solid move for them. Should be interesting to see what kind of money Maverick Bourque gets. When I'm grading this deal, I think for Dallas, it's a B. You do get the cap flexibility, but you lose a very good player, Maverick Bourque, and you're going to have to find a way to replace him still with limited cap space and an RFA in Jason Robertson. And for the Predators, I'm going to go with an A. I think it's a very solid move from them, getting younger, getting some offensive talent, and not having to pay too hefty of a price. The next deal is a bit of a smaller one, but the Penguins go out and acquire Nick Robertson, and the Leafs get a 2028 fourth-round pick in return. Kyle Dubas drafted Nick Robertson in 2019 when he was the Leafs GM, and what you're getting in Robertson is a 24-year-old undersized winger who just scores goals. Doesn't provide much else, but 16 goals, 16 assists in 78 games for the Leafs last year. And if he's given some opportunity in Pittsburgh, playing with a playmaker like a Malkin or a Crosby, maybe he can get to that 20 to 25 goal range. And for the Leafs, you're getting a fourth-round pick back for a second-round pick, so not very great value there. But Nick Robertson clearly does not fit the direction of this Toronto team. Chaika has gone out and acquired a defensively-minded head coach in Jim Hiller, as well as signed countless bottom six defensive players like Colton Sissons in free agency, Teddy Bluger, Brandon Duhamel, as well as trading for Nick Paul. So it didn't really make much sense to have Nick Robertson on the team. He's also been in trade rumors for years and requested to trade out of Toronto. So for trade grades for the Penguins, I'm going to go with an A-. They have so much draft capital, a fourth-round pick really doesn't matter to them, and Nick Robertson has some upside. Maybe Dan Bylsma can turn him into a very effective middle six scoring winger like he did with Igor Chinnikov. And for the Leafs, I don't think you're going to lose much sleep over losing Nick Robertson. You get a fourth-round pick back, it's okay value, so I'll go with a B. And then getting into the Nick Paul trade, the Leafs acquire Nick Paul and Tampa acquires Dennis Hildeby, along with the Leafs' 28 third-round pick and 27 fourth-round pick. Nick Paul is a 31-year-old with 2 years left on a contract paying him $3.15 million. He can play down the middle and on the wing and was a super effective bottom sixer for Tampa after being acquired in 2022 at deadline. That year, he famously also scored both goals in a 2-1 victory over the Leafs in Game 7 of the first round. He did have a pretty dramatic fall offensively this season with only 15.7 goals, 8 assists. But prior to that, he was a 20-goal, 40-point player. And if he can bounce back to, let's say, 15-goal, 30-point form while playing strong defense, I think he really fits in with this team that John Chaika is building and could be an effective player for Toronto. And on the Tampa side, you get Dennis Hildeby, who's a 24-year-old massive goaltender, 6'7", 222 pounds. In his brief stint with the Leafs this season, despite losing 11 of 16 games, he had a .914 save percentage and nearly 10 goals saved above expected. One of the biggest problems in Tampa over the last few years has been that they haven't had a reliable goaltender to back up Andrei Vasilevskiy, and Vasilevskiy is fatigued come playoff time, it seems like. So Dennis Hildeby might be a perfect backup for Vasilevskiy. And on top of that, you get a third and a fourth round pick back, which you can use at the trade deadline next year, for example, as well as gaining over $3 million in cap space, which allowed them to then go out and sign John Carlson to a 2-year deal at $8.5 million. So this is an unbelievable deal on the Tampa perspective, in my opinion. So for trade grades on the Toronto end, I'm going to go with a B- just because I think this is pretty expensive for Nick Paul, although I do like the fit. And on Tampa's side, I think you got to go with an A+. The next deal, we see the Edmonton Oilers try to solve their goaltending problem here by acquiring Devin Levi and a 7th round pick from the Buffalo Sabres in exchange for a 2028 3rd round pick. Now, Devin Levi is a 24-year-old goaltender who was once a very highly touted prospect. However, over the last 3 seasons, his numbers continue to get worse. He didn't even play in the NHL last season, as the Sabres have Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen, Alex Lyon, and then Colton Ellis as the 3rd stringer. So Devin Levi has really been pushed down the depth chart for Buffalo. And in his last NHL stint, he lost 7 of 9 games with nearly an .870 save percentage. So he's a depreciating asset, and they're going to sell him while he still has value. So I like it on the Buffalo end. And for the Oilers, who cares about this 3rd round pick? You're also getting a 7th round pick back, so it's not a high price to pay for a goaltender who has shown potential. Connor McDavid has 2 years left on his contract. This might be their last chance to win a cup with him, so it's very risky heading into next season with a goaltending tandem of Tristan Jarry, Frederik Andersen, and Devin Levi. But it looks like Stan Bowman is banking on at least one of them performing well for this team, and maybe with Mike Babcock, the team plays better defense and the goaltending won't be so much of an issue, but that remains to be seen. So grading this deal for Buffalo, I'm going to go with a B+ because I think it's very solid value for Levi, and they don't really need him. And on Edmonton, it's a risk you kind of have to take, so I'm going to go with an A-, and if it doesn't work out, then who really cares? And moving on to the next Edmonton Oilers trade, they somehow were able to trade Darnell Nurse without retaining anything, as they sent him to the San Jose Sharks in exchange for Shakir Muka-Madulin and prospect Zach Sharp. So for the Oilers here, Darnell Nurse was arguably on the worst contract in the league, making $9.25 million for the next 4 seasons. He's 31 years old. It's not like he's young and is likely to bounce back. He's probably going to regress if anything. And somehow they were able to move off of this entire contract without retaining anything. And they didn't even have to pay any draft picks or anything. They were able to get a solid defenseman potentially in Shakir Muka-Madulin back. And they were able to sign Ryan Shea, extend Kasperi Kapanen, sign Matthew Joseph and Freddie Anderson. And they still have money left over to go out and make some more moves. So it should be interesting to see what Stan Bowman does now with the newfound cap space. So unbelievable work by Edmonton in this deal. And for San Jose, I just don't understand it. Yes, the cap is rising and they have an abundance of cap space. I understand they need defense too. But Darnell Nurse is not the guy. He's 31 years old, 4 years left on a terrible contract. Even with the salary cap rising, he's not worth it. And let's say he bounces back to a 40-point, decent 2A defenseman. That is the best case scenario. The upside is just really not there in my opinion. And you help a divisional rival get off the worst contract in hockey without getting paid anything. They literally gave up a promising young defenseman in Muka-Madulin. Sure, he might not be much, but a 3rd pair shutdown D and another prospect in exchange for the worst contract in hockey. And then they go out and spend more money on Jacob Trouba, and now you're giving Jacob Trouba and Darnell Nurse $17 million combined. You've got 1 year left of Celebrini and Smith on ELCs, and then they're going to get massive deals, so they've got lots of money now, but the salary cap can get tight very fast, and I definitely have my questions about Mike Grier as a GM, even though they still should have a bright future. So grading this deal, Edmonton, A+, obviously, and for San Jose, being generous, I'm giving them a D-. Next, we have the first of a flurry of deals coming out of New York as the Rangers acquire Joonas Korpisalo from the Bruins. in exchange for an AHL player and a 4th round pick. With Jonathan Quick retiring, the Rangers were in need of a backup goalie. I thought they were going to run Dylan Garand, who was pretty good to end the season there, but I guess they'll leave him in the AHL, and they get a veteran backup for Shesterkin. Korpisalo hasn't really been good since his stint in LA back in 2023. He's put up below average numbers both seasons in Boston and his first season and only season in Ottawa, so I don't really understand why he was the guy they decided to go out and get. But they really didn't give up much, and there's $1 million in salary retained on his cap hit as well. So $3 million for the next 2 seasons. So if he can be average for them, then it's an okay deal. So for trade grades, I'll give the Rangers a B. And for the Bruins, you clear up some cap space here. Don't really like that they retained, but Korpisalo wasn't really that good for them. They get a pick back. I'll go with a B+. And these teams actually made another deal as the Bruins acquired Will Borgen in exchange for a 2027 second round pick and a 2028 third round pick. Borgen's a 29-year-old right shot defenseman who makes $4.1 million for the next 4 seasons. He's pretty much a pure shutdown guy, has done okay in depth minutes. And I guess the hope for Boston is that they can play him on a second or third pair, and he can just be a stabilizing piece on the back end, which was actually an area they kind of struggled with last season, which is surprising with the Boston Bruins brand. And for the Rangers, I don't think Borgen's that great of a player, and you get a second and a third round pick back for him, so I think that's very solid value on their end. So for trade grades, I'll give the Rangers an A on this, and I'll give the Bruins a B-. And the Rangers then made a massive deal, sending Vinny Trocheck to Utah in exchange for Sean Durzi, Cole Baudouin, and a 2027 third-round pick. Utah gets a top-6 center that they've been looking for. Trocheck's a really good two-way player. The results haven't really been there the last 2 seasons, but the defensive acumen is there. Him and Jake T. Miller did not allow a single goal shorthanded at the Olympics. And he's also a very solid offensive player in his own right. On top of his two-way play, he's probably going to give you 20 goals and 40 assists. And I think he's going to slot really nicely into that second-line center role for Utah. Nick Schmaltz can move to the wing. And with the Barrett Hayton offer sheet, which I don't think they're going to match, this is massive to get another really good center in the mix for Utah. And they might very well be in contention to take a top 3 spot in the Central Division from a Dallas or a Minnesota next season. And for the Rangers, at the deadline, you probably would have thought they're looking for futures for Trocheck. But in this deal, they get a 27-year-old right-shot defenseman in Sean Durzi, who is a player who's going to help them right now. He's struggled with injuries, only 90 games over the last 2 seasons, but he's shown he can be a very solid offensive defenseman at the NHL level. And I think he can be a very effective puck mover behind Adam Fox, as well as taking over responsibilities for the second power play unit. He makes $6 million for the next 2 seasons, so if it doesn't work out, then they can pretty easily move off of him. And the Rangers also pick up Cole Baudouin, who's a very intriguing prospect to me. Nearly 90 points for Barrie this season. He's played at the World Juniors the last 2 years as well for Canada. And he kind of projects as a third-line energy guy, reliable defensively, can provide some physicality, and I think that's a really good fit for the Rangers for the future. So I really like this deal for both teams. For Utah, I'm going to give it an A-. I think it's okay value for Trocheck, and he's going to be an effective piece for them. Really, the only concern I have for them is that Trocheck is on the older side, so he isn't necessarily the perfect fit for Utah when it comes to their contention window. And for the Rangers, I'm going to go with an A-. I think this is decent value for Trocheck. Personally, I would have preferred probably draft picks or futures, but you do get a player who can help you now in Sean Durzi and Cole Baudouin, who can step into the lineup maybe next season or the year after. And the final move the Rangers made was a head-scratcher. They trade for Marcus Pettersson, and in exchange they send the Canucks a 2030 conditional first-round pick. Then it will transition to a 2031 unprotected first-round pick. Now, Marcus Pettersson is a really good two-way defenseman, 30 years old on a pretty solid deal, paying him $5.5 million for the next 5 seasons. And he's definitely going to help the left side of the Rangers, which is a real weakness. I think Borgen to Pettersson is a massive upgrade. But, the Rangers were 16th in the East last year. No one else is really getting worse. So I don't understand why they think that they can win right now. Yes, you have Igor Shesterkin and Adam Fox, and maybe if Shesterkin goes off, they can sneak into the playoffs. But they're probably going to get bounced in the first round by a team like Carolina or Florida in the best case scenario. So giving up that first round pick so long down the road is so risky to me.
I would not be surprised if the Rangers are bottom 10 in 2030, and then in 2031, who knows, that could be the first overall pick. So while I like the player for New York, this really just seems like way too big of a risk. And on the Canucks end, I mean, first round pick for Marcus Pettersson, I'm pretty sure they gave up a first round pick that they got from the Rangers in the JT Miller trade to acquire him, and that pick actually ended up being Ben Kindle. So grading this, I think the Canucks are a pretty easy A+, and for the Rangers, I'm going to go with a C.
Quickly going to go through this one. Vegas sends Kolesar to the Red Wings for a 29 third-round pick and a 2027 seventh-round pick. Kolesar is a 29-year-old fourth-line physical two-way winger. Makes $2.5 million for the next 2 seasons. He can get you almost 10 goals and 20 points a season, so kind of expensive price to pay for a player like him from the Red Wings, but I think they need a player like him, so I'll give them a B-. And Vegas, you clear cap space for a player you don't really need. I'll give him a B+. And we're finally at the last deal. The Wild acquire Blake Coleman and Olli Maatta from the Calgary Flames in exchange for Jacob Middleton, a 2029 second, 2027 third, and a 2028 fourth. The Flames also retain half of Coleman's salary. Blake Coleman's a 34-year-old. He'll be making $2.45 million for next season in Minnesota. Really effective two-way, forechecking middle six forward. He got 20 goals last year on a Flames team that was starved for offense. And he's a noted playoff performer. He's won multiple Stanley Cups for the Tampa Bay Lightning. So I really like this add. I think he adds a lot to Minnesota's middle six. And Olli Maatta is a pretty solid third pair shutdown defenseman. Makes just over $3 million for the next 2 seasons. So basically a less expensive, arguably better Jacob Middleton. And Jacob Middleton goes to the Flames. A 30-year-old defensive defenseman, makes $4.4 million for the next 3 seasons. Not really a great analytics player, but he provides physicality, grit, those kind of things. And I'm sure the Flames could flip him at the deadline if they would like to, or pair him with one of their young offensive defensemen like Zane Parekh or Simon Nemec. And the Flames also get a good amount of draft capital, a second, third, and fourth round pick. They continue to stockpile the draft capital. So honestly, I like this deal for both teams. For Minnesota, I'm going to give them a B+. I love the add of Coleman and Maatta. They still do need a center very badly, and maybe they could have been the team that got Trocheck, but we'll see if they're the team that gets Larkin now. And I like that they didn't give up any premium assets in this deal either. And for the Flames, this is just solid work by Conroy. They're going to be really bad next year, but hopefully they win the draft lottery and can land a Alexei Joseph or land a DuPont. So if you made it to the end, thank you so much for watching. This is definitely the longest video on the channel. So let me know any of your thoughts down below on these deals. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.